The unexpected visitor. Eli Morgan wiped sweat from his brow as he surveyed his struggling crops. 5 years on the frontier of Novatera, and farming hadn't gotten any easier. The human colony was still young on this alien world, barely 30 years established, and outpost farmers like him had it worst. His patch of land sat at the very edge of claimed territory, butting right up against the wild expanses that humans had yet to tame or even properly explore. The twin suns were beginning their slow descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across his fields. The irrigation system he'd cobbled together from salvaged parts hummed quietly, distributing precious water to rows of Earth-native crops that he'd genetically modified to survive in Novatera's peculiar soil composition. The government-issued atmospheric filters on his modest prefab house worked overtime, as they always did during the dry season, keeping the slightly higher oxygen levels inside at a comfortable Earth standard. Eli didn't mind the isolation. After 15 years in the Colonial Defense Force, the quiet of frontier life was a welcome change. Most days he interacted only with his agricultural drones and the colony supply runners who came monthly to collect whatever surplus he managed to produce. The nearest neighbor was 50 kilometers away, another ex-military type who preferred solitude to the bustle of the main settlement. As Eli headed back toward his house, a movement in the sky caught his attention. At first, he thought it might be one of the native avians. Most of the flying fauna on Novatera resembled pterodactyls from Earth's distant past, though with key biological differences that scientists were still cataloging. But this creature's flight pattern was erratic, wobbling and lurching through the air. Something was wrong. He shaded his eyes against the setting suns and watched as the creature struggled to maintain altitude. Its wingspan was impressive, easily 4 meters from tip to tip, with a body that was sleek and predatory. Eli recognized it as one of the raptorial species that inhabited the mountain ranges to the north. Locals called them Sky Reavers for their habit of diving at incredible speeds to snatch prey. The creature was clearly injured as it flew overhead. Eli could see that one wing was damaged, the membrane torn. It managed a few more labored flaps before it faltered and plummeted, disappearing behind a rise about 300 meters from his house. Eli debated with himself. These Sky Reavers were known to be dangerous, with razor-sharp talons and teeth designed for tearing flesh. The colony xenobiologists classified them as apex predators to be avoided. But something in him, perhaps the same instinct that had led him to rescue wounded comrades on the battlefield, couldn't just let the creature suffer. With a sigh, he went back to the house and grabbed his medkit, a stunner just in case, and a portable scanner. The twin suns were touching the horizon by the time he crested the rise and spotted the fallen creature. It lay in a crumpled heap, one wing extended awkwardly. As Eli approached, it raised its head and fixed him with intelligent eyes that shone with an amber light. Its scales were primarily obsidian black, with hints of deep blue that caught the fading sunlight. It opened its jaws, revealing rows of needle-like teeth, and emitted a warning screech that sent chills down Eli's spine. "Easy there," Eli said, knowing the creature couldn't understand him but hoping his calm tone might have some effect. "I'm not here to hurt you." The raptor tried to stand but collapsed back down, clearly weakened from its fall and whatever had damaged its wing in the first place. Eli activated his scanner and slowly moved it over the creature from a safe distance. The readings confirmed what he could see, a severe tear in the wing membrane and signs of dehydration. Otherwise, its vitals seemed stable, if elevated from stress. Eli kept his movements slow and deliberate as he set down the scanner and opened his medkit. The creature watched him warily, its breathing labored. "I'm going to help you," Eli murmured, "but you've got to promise not to tear my face off, deal?" The Sky Reaver made a chirping sound that Eli chose to interpret as agreement, though he kept the stunner within easy reach. Healing bonds. Working methodically, Eli prepared a nanogel patch designed for tissue repair. It was meant for human use, but he'd modified similar patches for livestock before. The biological principles weren't that different. The nanites would stimulate cell reproduction and create a temporary scaffold for the healing tissue. The real challenge was applying it. Eli knew he'd have to get close to the injured wing, within striking distance of those talons and teeth. He considered using the stunner first, but that might just traumatize the creature further. "Here goes nothing," he muttered and began his approach. The raptor hissed as Eli drew near but seemed too weak to mount a serious defense. With careful movements, Eli extended the nanogel applicator toward the torn wing membrane. The creature flinched but didn't attack. Taking that as permission, Eli quickly applied the gel along the edges of the tear. "This should help with the pain and start the healing process," he explained, backing away once the application was complete. "But you're going to need food and water to recover properly." As if understanding, the raptor's eyes followed him intently. Eli returned to his house and brought back a container of water and some raw protein cubes used for livestock feed. He set these within reach of the creature and stepped back. After a hesitant moment, the raptor stretched its neck forward and sniffed at the offerings. It dipped its snout into the water first, drinking deeply. Then, with surprising delicacy given its fearsome appearance, it began to consume the protein cubes. "I'll check on you tomorrow," Eli said, gathering his equipment. "Try to rest that wing." As Eli walked away, he glanced back over his shoulder. The Sky Reaver had settled into a more comfortable position, its injured wing carefully folded against its body. Its eyes remained fixed on him until he disappeared over the rise. That night, Eli read everything he could find in the colony's database about the Sky Reavers. The information was limited. They were territorial, hunted in small groups, and possessed remarkable intelligence for non-sentient creatures. Their preferred prey were the herbivorous herd animals that roamed the plains. There were no recorded instances of attacks on humans, though the database recommended caution. The next evening, Eli returned to the spot where he'd left the injured raptor, half expecting it to be gone. But the creature was still there, though it had dragged itself into the shade of a boulder. It seemed more alert today, raising its head as soon as Eli appeared. Over the next 2 weeks, Eli established a routine. Each evening, after finishing his farm work, he would bring food and fresh water to the Sky Reaver. He examined the wing regularly, applying fresh nanogel as needed. The tear was healing well, new tissue forming along the scaffold created by the gel. The raptor became increasingly comfortable with his presence. By the end of the first week, it no longer hissed or postured defensively when he approached. By the second week, it would make a peculiar trilling sound when it spotted him coming over the rise, almost like a greeting. Eli found himself talking to the creature during his visits, sharing stories of his day or memories from his military service. It was probably just his imagination, but the Sky Reaver seemed to listen, its head tilted slightly, those intelligent amber eyes tracking his movements. "You know," Eli said one evening as he examined the healing wing, "I should probably give you a name. Can't keep calling you the Raptor or the Sky Reaver in my head." The creature made a soft chittering sound. "How about Midnight? For those obsidian scales of yours?" The raptor blinked slowly, which Eli took as approval. "Midnight it is, then. Farewell and return." As the third week began, Midnight was testing its wing, stretching it carefully and making short gliding jumps from the boulder where it had taken up residence. The tear had closed completely, though the membrane still looked thin and vulnerable at the site of the injury. Eli knew the raptor would soon be ready to return to the wild. He felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness at the prospect. He'd grown accustomed to their evening meetings, to the intelligent company that asked nothing of him beyond food and basic care. On the 23rd day, Eli arrived at the boulder to find Midnight perched on top, wings fully extended. The raptor looked magnificent in the light of the setting suns, its wingspan casting a broad shadow. When it spotted Eli, it emitted the now familiar trill and glided down to land a few meters away. Eli set down the food container. "Looks like you're feeling better." Midnight approached, but instead of going directly for the food as usual, it stopped in front of Eli. Slowly, deliberately, it lowered its head until it was at eye level with him. Those amber eyes studied him intently, and Eli had the uncanny feeling that the creature was trying to memorize his face. Then, with surprising gentleness, Midnight pressed its snout against Eli's outstretched hand, the first time it had initiated physical contact. The scales were smooth and warm to the touch. "You're welcome," Eli said softly, understanding the gesture for what it was, gratitude. Midnight stepped back, consumed the food in a few quick bites, then spread its wings. With a powerful leap, it was airborne, circling once above Eli before turning toward the northern mountains and vanishing into the darkening sky. Eli stood watching long after the raptor had disappeared from view. He told himself it was better this way. Midnight belonged in the wild, not hanging around a human farm on the edge of the colony. Still, as he walked back to his empty house, he couldn't help feeling the weight of solitude settling back onto his shoulders. Life returned to its previous rhythm. Eli tended his crops, repaired equipment, and sent his harvest to the colony. Days passed with only the agricultural drones for company. Sometimes he found himself glancing at the northern sky, but there was never any sign of Midnight. 2 months after Midnight's departure, Eli was repairing an irrigation line when his security system pinged an alert. Something large was moving at the edge of his property. He pulled up the feed on his wrist display and was surprised to see Midnight gliding in lazy circles above the area where they'd first met. By the time Eli reached the spot, the raptor had landed and was waiting, head held high. Eli approached slowly, uncertain of how to proceed. Had Midnight returned because it was injured again? But the creature looked healthy, its wings intact. "Hello there," Eli said. "Didn't expect to see you again." Midnight made the familiar trilling sound and stepped forward. It dropped something from its mouth, a small gleaming object that caught the light of the setting suns. Then, with a screech, it launched itself back into the sky and disappeared once more. Eli bent down to examine what Midnight had left behind. It was a polished stone about the size of his thumb, veined with an iridescent blue mineral he'd never seen before. He turned it over in his palm, wondering at the significance. Was this a gift? A token of some sort? The unexpected visit left Eli with more questions than answers, but also with a strange sense of warmth. Midnight had not forgotten him. A week later, Midnight returned again, this time bringing a different unusual stone. The visits became a pattern. Every 7 to 10 days, the raptor would appear, leave some small object, and depart. Sometimes it stayed long enough for Eli to offer it food. Sometimes it merely circled overhead before flying away. The objects were always interesting, unusual stones, fragments of crystallized minerals, once even what appeared to be a piece of naturally formed glass, smoothed by wind and sand. Unexpected threat. 6 months into this curious relationship, Eli woke to the sound of approaching vehicles. He checked his security feed and felt his stomach tighten. 3 rugged transports were making their way across his land, kicking up dust as they followed the narrow access road to his farmhouse. Eli recognized the insignia painted on their sides, not colony officials but a raider group that occasionally harassed outlying settlements. Former colonists who had rejected the governance of the main settlement, preferring to take what they needed rather than build it themselves. He quickly pulled on his clothes and retrieved the pulse rifle he'd kept from his military days. It had been years since he'd needed to use it, but the maintenance habits had stuck with him. The weapon hummed to life as he powered it up, its charge indicator glowing green. By the time Eli stepped onto his porch, the vehicles had stopped in a loose semicircle about 30 meters from his house. 8 raiders emerged, all armed, their faces weathered and hard. Their leader, a tall woman with a shock of red hair and a scar running down one cheek, stepped forward. "Morning, farmer," she called, her voice carrying easily across the distance. "We're running low on supplies. Thought you might be willing to share." Eli kept his rifle lowered but ready. "The colony sends supply runners every month. If you need something, take it up with them." The woman smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Now, that's not very neighborly. Especially since we've come all this way." She gestured at his fields. "You've got plenty. We're just asking for a reasonable contribution." "I contribute to the colony," Eli replied. As is my obligation under the settlement charter. I suggest you do the same. The leader's expression hardened. The charter doesn't mean anything out here. It's just about survival. She raised her hand, and the raiders beside her raised their weapons. We're taking what we need. Whether you're alive to see it is up to you. Eli raised his rifle, calculating his odds. 8 against 1, with only his house for cover. Not good. But he'd faced worse odds during the border disputes. And he'd be damned if he'd let these parasites take what he'd worked so hard to build. Last chance to leave peacefully, he warned. The leader's response was to fire a shot that whistled past Eli's ear and thudded into the doorframe behind him. The other raiders fanned out, using their vehicles for cover. Eli ducked back into his house as more shots peppered the exterior walls. The prefab structure wasn't designed for combat, but the reinforced panels would hold for a while. He took up position at a window, sighting down his rifle at the nearest raider. He squeezed the trigger, and the man dropped with a cry, clutching his shoulder. But the odds were still against him. If they rushed the house from multiple directions, he couldn't cover all approaches. And if they damaged his atmospheric filters, the house would become uninhabitable within hours. As Eli prepared for what might be his last stand, a strange sound caught his attention, a distant screeching that seemed to be growing louder. For a moment, he thought it might be reinforcements for the raiders, more vehicles approaching. But then he recognized the sound. It was a sound he'd heard before, but never in such numbers. The hunting cry of Sky Reavers. The raiders heard it too. Their leader looked up, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm. What the hell is that? Eli moved to another window with a view of the northern sky and felt his breath catch in his throat. The night sky erupted with screeching cries as hundreds of massive winged shapes descended from the clouds. The raiders froze in their tracks, weapons still aimed at Eli's farmhouse. Their leader's eyes widened in terror as the first of the alien raptors landed before her, its obsidian scales gleaming under the twin moons, massive talons digging into the soil. Protection and understanding. The creature lowered its head, intelligent eyes fixed on the human who had threatened the farm. Behind it, more raptors landed in perfect formation, creating a living barrier between the raiders and Eli's home. Eli immediately recognized the lead raptor, Midnight, identifiable by the healed scar across its wing membrane. It stepped forward and opened its massive jaws. No one had ever heard these creatures vocalize anything beyond hunting screeches. But now it spoke, not in any human language, but in a series of clicks and trills that somehow conveyed a single unmistakable message. This human is under our protection. Leave now or die. The raiders backed toward their vehicles, weapons wavering between the raptors and Eli's house. Their leader, trying to maintain some semblance of control, called out, "What kind of trick is this, farmer? You training these monsters now?" But her voice trembled, betraying her fear. The raptors took a synchronized step forward, wings half extended to make themselves look larger. Several of them scraped their talons against the ground, a clear threat display. "I suggest you leave," Eli called from his doorway. They seemed to have strong opinions about uninvited guests. The raiders needed no further encouragement. They scrambled into their vehicles, engines roaring to life. As they sped away, kicking up clouds of dust, several of the Sky Reavers took to the air, following the retreating vehicles to the edge of Eli's property before turning back. When the dust settled, Eli cautiously stepped out onto his porch. The raptors had formed a loose semicircle, with Midnight at the center. The creature approached, stopping a few meters from the steps. It made a soft trilling sound, the same greeting it had used during their time together. "Thank you," Eli said, still processing what he had just witnessed. "I don't know how you knew, but thank you." Midnight tilted its head, those amber eyes studying Eli with an intelligence that seemed far beyond what the colony's scientists had attributed to the species. Then it made a series of deliberate sounds, clicks and whistles that, while not forming words Eli could understand, nevertheless conveyed meaning through their pattern and cadence. The message was clear: we protect our own. Over the following months, Eli's life changed dramatically. Word spread through the colony about the farmer on the edge of the settlement who had somehow formed an alliance with the Sky Reavers. Scientists and officials visited, eager to learn how he had managed such a feat. Eli told them the simple truth: he had helped one of them when it was injured, asking nothing in return. The concept seemed foreign to many of the visitors, who saw Novatera's native life as resources to be studied or exploited rather than beings worthy of respect and compassion. The Sky Reavers continued their regular visits, though never again in such numbers as the day they had driven off the raiders. Midnight remained Eli's primary contact, often bringing new objects, not just stones now, but also fragments of technology from abandoned exploration sites, pieces of native flora with medicinal properties, and once, maps scratched into thin sheets of a material like parchment, showing regions of the planet the colony had yet to explore. Through these exchanges, a rudimentary communication developed. The colony linguists who studied the recordings Eli made were astonished at the complexity of the Sky Reavers' vocalizations and the speed with which they adapted to communicate with a different species. As for Eli, he no longer felt the weight of solitude. His farm became a bridge between two worlds, a place where human and alien could meet in peaceful exchange. The colony's leadership, recognizing the value of such a relationship, provided him with additional resources and protection. One evening, as the twin suns set over his flourishing fields, Eli sat on his porch with Midnight perched on a specially built stand nearby. They watched the stars emerge in comfortable silence, two beings from different worlds who had found common ground in an act of kindness. Eli thought about how a single decision, to help rather than fear, had changed not just his life but potentially the future of human settlement on Novatera. The path forward would not be easy. There would always be those like the raiders who saw only what they could take. But there was hope in knowing that understanding could begin with something as simple as tending a wounded wing. Midnight made a soft sound, drawing Eli's attention. The Raptor was looking at the northern horizon, where the silhouettes of more Sky Reavers were visible against the darkening sky. With a respectful dip of its head to Eli, Midnight spread its wings and launched into the air to join its kind. Eli watched them fly together, their wings catching the last light of the setting suns. He knew Midnight would return, just as he knew that what had begun here, on this small farm at the edge of human territory, was only the beginning of a greater journey for both species. The end.